What's up, everybody? It's guubums back with another comps video. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm a competitive player from North America. I've been competing since set 4, and I've been rank 1 every set since I started playing, and I just recently did well in the most recent NA qualifier tournament. And yeah, I was a Worlds finalist back in set 6, and without further ado, let's just get into it. Today, I'm mostly just going to be talking about reroll comps. Hopefully, in the near future, I'll be putting out another video that will be a follow-up to this one that'll have like some of the more standard lines, some of the more non-reroll comps, but given how there's a lot of reroll comps in the meta right now, I figured it's a really popular playstyle. It's a playstyle that really kind of like resonates with some of the lesser experienced players. So yeah, let's get into it. For a disclaimer, I guess like this is not going to be in any particular order. I'm just going to be talking about them and like how to play them and when to play them, kind of like in a general case. But all of them have their merits and all of them are playable. So yeah, if you just want to get LP playing some reroll, then this video is going to be for you. So the very first one I'm going to be talking about is going to be Kayle reroll. For the most part, this comp is going to be centered around playing Kayle. It's a 1 cost, so you're going to be rolling on 5 for most of the game. You're just going to sit low level. And for most of the game, yeah, you're just going to go for double Rage Blade Kayle. You're going to go for either Poppy or Galio items, depending on which you're closer to. Sometimes you hit Poppy 3, for example, before Kayle, in which case sometimes you'll even be rolling for a Lowy. So you can roll for all 3 of these units 3-starred on 5. You should be holding every Galio you see, just in case, like, if you do end up hitting a lot of Galios, you can go for a Galio 3 later in the game, oftentimes when you go 7. It's generally played around 7 Demacia, so even if you hit a Lowy 3, oftentimes it does end up getting dropped, but it's still a good option to go for, especially for your mid-game. And sometimes you'll be able to play 7 Demacia even though you have an Lowy on your board. Either you have, like, a Spat, or a Fawn, or something along those lines that just lets you hit everything on level 7 or level 8, depending on, I guess, like, where in the game you can kind of reach. So yeah, this comp is pretty self-explanatory. You're just playing around Kayle. You go for double Rage Blade. Pretty much no other items matter. After the double Rage Blade, you just start going for tank items. Eventually, you're going to be playing around Sona, so putting like a couple items on Sona is pretty good. A couple items on Quinn is also fine, but none of these are also all that necessary. The tank items are necessary, but to a certain extent, they're pretty flexible, so you can go Warmogs, Gargoyles. Obviously, oftentimes if you're playing around Demacia, these units are going to be getting their extra Demacia item. J4 is going to get a Warmogs, Galio is going to get a Redemption. It's unclear exactly like which one is the best. You're gonna have to use a little bit of your, I guess, thinking to figure out like which one is the best for your spot, like which Demacia item is the best for your spot. But for the most part, obviously Kayle gets her Giant Slayer, but for the most part, yeah, there's not gonna be too much difference. This one's pretty easy. I think like for the most part, like since the item requirements are really just like bow start Kayle with you have like say like 2 to 3, maybe 4 Kales early and a couple poppies on stage 1. You can just commit to this immediately. As for augments, the best one at any point. 2-1, 3-2, or 4-2, it's always going to be Petricite Shackles, which is just going to be like a Demacia specific augment. Obviously, you need Demacia on 3-2 and 4-2 to have access to that augment, but if you've already committed to this comp by 3-2 and 4-2, then for the like, you know, that's not something that you really have to be worried about. Taking that augment on 2-1 and then committing Kayle is also a possibility. It's perfectly reasonable. It always gives you at least 1 Galio, 1 Kayle. So like say you have 2 Kales already, or like say you have like 2 Kales and like 3 Poppies already, then it's really good because like obviously you'll open with a Kayle 2, a Poppy 2, and then a Galio 1. You'll get your Demacia on early, and then you'll be able to actually tempo out with this comp. You don't even have to lose streak. Obviously, like if you don't plan on lose streaking, then you're gonna have like less item carousel priority. So for the most part, lose streaking is going to be like the more common way to play this, but it's not out of the question to tempo it because it's actually reasonably strong. As for portals, you're going to want to angle the econ portals to play this just because like it's an expensive comp. Eventually, you do cap out by like going level 7, fitting in some Demacia, and then if the game wills it or permits it, then you can go 9 for that. Obviously, a really strong Kayle spike. Oftentimes, like taking stuff like level up, hedge fund on 3-2 and 4-2 can help you like kind of squeeze out a level 9 that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get, which allows you to cap really high, and then you can win out the game that way. Moving on to the next one, we have the most standard Bruiser reroll, Cho'gath reroll. The most obvious thing to play this with in terms of augments is just Bruiser +1. So whether that be Bruiser Heart or Bruiser Crest, both are fine. You're rerolling Cho'gath, Renekton, or Cassio. All 3 are relatively important. Obviously, the most important one is going to be Cho'gath. You generally want to be playing this when you have like 2 to 3 Cho'gaths starting on stage 1 already. They're already getting stacks off the neutrals. For those of you who don't know, Cho'gath gains HP based on the number of stacks he gets, and he gets every stack based on just like ulting a unit that dies. So very similar to League if you've ever played League, but anyways. The only items you really care about are going to be Cho'gath items, Bramble, Redemption, Declaw. You should be greeting for these pretty aggressively, but aside from that, you just want to like load up on some damage items wherever you can. The best ones are going to be Shiv, Spark somewhere, so you have extra cloaks is a decent option. Blue Buff Cassio is her best item, but like Gunblade, Spark, Shiv, these items, it doesn't matter. Like I kind of like put Cassio and Azir interchangeably. The reason is if you don't end up hitting Cassio 3 and you hit like say Cho'gath and either Renekton or even sometimes not hitting Renekton early, you can push levels and eventually be able to play around Azir 2, which is a good replacement for Cassio, especially now since Azir just got buffed. It's going to be like a really strong replacement. You're always going to be playing 6 Bruiser wherever you can. Obviously, the reason why this comp is so good with Bruiser +1 is because then you don't even have to get Scion, which obviously most of the time will require that you get to level 8 to get access to. Otherwise, like maybe you hit a lucky one on 7, or there's like a whole kind of like myriad of factors to be able to get a Scion. But for the most part, you do have to go for that Scion, so that's why getting that Bruiser +1 is really important. Don't be afraid to just put Bruiser on Ashe, Azir, or Cassio, because like sometimes you just need to, or else you can't fit your board. None of that matters, but for the most part, like your early mid game is going to be played around something like this. These 3 kind of like get added in later. Obviously, these 2 are the high cost units. You want to be playing around 4 Bruiser plus Cassio. Renekton items are going to be the same as Cho'gath, but obviously you do prioritize Cho'gath first. So if you have Renekton 3 as well, feel free to itemize it with similar items. Stuff like Titans is also fine. I think Renekton's like slightly less dependent than Cho'gath. Obviously, Cho'gath being your main carry is going to be like more item dependent. Like he's going to be needing specific items, whereas like Renekton being like the off carry or off tank, however you want to put it, is going to be able to like use all sorts of random stuff. TG is fine in a pinch as well. Just make sure late game you do get access to like something like an anti-heal. Obviously, that could be Morello or Sunfire, but Sunfire using a belt and a chain oftentimes is more difficult to get because you do need 2 chains for your Cho'Gath's Ramble, right? Otherwise, like putting in a Heimerdinger, going Mechano, and then like if you need, like say you don't have a Shiv and you need Shrinko or Shrink Ray, that's going to be powerful as well. But yeah, generally speaking, this comp is pretty straightforward. Just get items, just get the units, the augments, Bruiser +1 as mentioned. Otherwise, stuff like Cybernetic Bulk, Unified Resistance, you'll notice it's going to be really, really strong on this comp. There's probably a couple, like some certain reroll augments such as Pandora's Bench on 2-1 is really strong, because not only does that allow you to hit your Cho'Gath, Renekton, and Cassio, but once you get level 6, once you get level 7, and you start seeing these 4 and 5 costs on your shop, then you can put those on the bench and reroll for the specific ones you want. Oftentimes, once again, that's just going to be Scion and Sedge, but also even later into the game, like you might be able to, like, say you once you already have Scion, say you're playing in a portal or a region that has a really good rise, such as Freljord, for example, is the most obvious example. You'll want to be rolling for those as well. If you are so fortunate to, I guess, like snowball this comp really hard, and you can get to like level 7 and upgrade your entire board, you should be looking to go level 9 and start playing a lot of strong backline legendaries. Bruiser Bel'Veth is really strong. At that point, you might be able to drop Cassio for, once again, Azir 2, Ahri 2 is a great replacement for Cassio 3, but Gangplank is fine as well. Sometimes you can go for Rek'Sai 3, in which case then you're going for like Titans, BT, but it's going to be a lot more difficult. So there's like a lot of different options you can kind of like really go for with this comp, but for the most part, you really are just playing around, I guess, like this standard board, and everything else is just going to be based on like your spot and like what you can get to. So I wouldn't think about it too much. Just get familiar with, I guess, this board. It's a really standard comp that I'm sure you've already seen before, so I shouldn't really actually have to talk about it all too much. Next up is Rogues. This comp has gotten nerfed multiple times, but for the most part, it's still played the exact same way. We're going to go for BT Graves. Healing on all of them is going to be best in slot. Sterak's is also best in slot. Night Harvester is also best in slot. So this is probably the true best in slot of Graves if you can attain it. But at the same time, most of these items are like pretty superficial, with the exception of maybe BT, because you can replace these with anything. It could just be Lost Whisper. Any damage item is fine, i.e. As you scale, you want to be putting items on Katarina in the form of Spark, in the form of Gunblade, in the form of BT is fine as well. Crown Guard oftentimes is really, really underrated. Night Harvester is best in slot for every single rogue. So if you get a bunch of Night Harvesters, you can just feel free to just drop them in. You do want a form of Armor Shred, whether that be Even Shroud or Lost Whisper, obviously is up to you. But just make sure you do get one of those, especially if you're stacking Graves. For this comp, you're just going to be rolling on 5 for most of the game. And then after you finish rolling on 5 for your Graves 3, then you want to go 6 and go for everything else 3-star. Oftentimes, one of the most common questions I get with this comp is like, okay, so level 6 obviously has worse odds for your 3 costs than level 7, so why don't I go level 7 to look for my Katarina and Echo 3? Well, the reason for that is just like, 1, you're going from 30% odds to 35% odds, and 2, you do also want to hit Kiana and Jinx 3 a lot of the time, especially if you have a Rogue Spat. Oftentimes that ends up landing on Jinx. Oftentimes you get certain Zons are going to be really, really powerful, so stacking Jinx and Echo is pretty reasonable. And also, like, it takes a lot of gold to get to level 7, some odd 20 to 30 gold, depending on, I guess, like, where you are in the game. So most of the time, just staying on 6 and trying to hit all your 3 stars is going to be more preferable. Once you're only missing one of the 3 stars, either Echo or Katarina, and say you're in a healthy position, then you can go 7 and you can start trying to scale around like either playing 4 Gunner or you play like a better Slayer. Say you hit 8 Chalks, obviously start fitting some legendaries as the game progresses. But just playing around 4 Gunner is like the most, I guess, easy way to go about it. This is like a standard level 7 board, obviously Aphelios until you have Gangplank is going to be fine as well. Obviously, Jace can also go. Aphelios without items is probably worse than Jace without items. So I'd say like if you hit Gangplank, most of the time you're actually dropping Aphelios. This is like a pretty standard board. Same idea. Augments for this comp is going to be look like Vampiric Blades. I think that augment did get nerfed because it was really, really strong, but that augment did get nerfed. Any healing augment, Harm Assist, Cybernetic Leech, healing orbs is going to be really strong with this comp. Just any sort of healing, because like the way this comp works is really just like hoping that your rogues go infinite as they like attack the enemy backline. So it's a really strong comp in that sense. Otherwise, stuff like Unified Resistance is just giving your team more armor and MR. Same with like LDP, long distance pals. You could just pal whichever, I guess, like carries you have itemized and or upgraded. So just like strong combat augments are going to be the best for this comp. I think generally going for econ augments to play this comp is going to be a little bit weaker. Just because this comp doesn't cap that high. Even when you have everything 3-star, you generally want some sort of combat just so you can like pretty much just like beat them straight up, right? Beat the enemy team straight up. So yeah, look out for this comp. I think this is probably, I want to say, the weakest comp in the 6 that I'm going to show you. But at the same time, it's not all that dependent on like stringent conditions, as well as I think it should be slightly stronger at lower elos of play where people are not as familiar with like positioning around rogues. So yeah, still feel free to play this comp. Even after all the nerfs, it's still pretty strong. Next up, we have Neeko and Soraka reroll. This comp you've probably seen enough of. I'm just going to go for like a couple healing items on Neeko. You go for utility items Taric, but oftentimes you're not going to have this many items. And also, you're not actually playing 2 Sorakas. I just put 2 Sorakas here just because obviously a Soraka can only fit 3 items, and I'm trying to show you all the different items you can build. There's like so many items you can build. I can actually even add a 3rd Soraka and start even putting, more items here. And like for the most part, like you'll still be able to, and then I can even go for a 4th Soraka. And pretty much what I'm trying to say is that the item requirements for the comp are not all that stringent. So as long as you have like a couple items on your Neeko, a couple items on your Soraka, make sure you get some sort of MR shred, make sure you get some sort of anti-healing in the form of either Morello. Morello can actually go on either of them. It's something that I guess like lower elo players are not really familiar with. Like it is completely okay to put a Morello on these units. But obviously, in ideal cases, you want to have like 3, I guess, like best in slot items. And that's always going to look like Archangels. I think like the best, I don't know, like the thing with this comp is like best in slot really truly depends on your spot. Like if you need a Shiv, then you're always going to slam a Shiv right away, right? Because it is strong. But obviously, if you already have a Spark, you're not going to be looking to slam a Shiv. If you already have a Sunfire, you're not going to be looking to slam a Morello. And the same is vice versa. In this comp, you're just going to go level 6, go for all of these 3-star, Soraka, Taric, and Neeko. I know it's going to look a little bit strange because sometimes when you hit Shen on 6, you're going to have 4 Bastion, 3 Invoker. But I kind of urge you not to like think about the 3 Invoker all that much because the 4 Invoker is not all that relevant to this comp. I know a lot of people be like, okay, go 7, you're going for Taric and Neeko. But it is, once again, for the same idea as playing for level 6 on Rogues, you're going to be playing for level 6 with this comp as well. Just because with the extra gold, you do end up hitting a lot faster, and going to level 7 slows down your spike. And without going for 3 stars in this comp, you are going to bleed out and die. So just be a little bit careful with that. Obviously, this comp is going to be playing around Ixtal. So Ixtal has a lot of different random components to it. But at the same time, like none of them are really that important. I'd say the main ones you should look over for is Ice. So Ice frontline on Neeko is going to be really strong. The Ice Hex can spawn on any of these middle 5 hexes. These 2 hexes are actually going to be really weak. So if it is spawned on these 2 hexes, I would say you just low rolled. I would say no matter the Ixtal, you can play this comp, but Ice is the strongest. Otherwise, I think Wind, Soraka in the backline, one of these 2 hexes, or one of these 3 hexes are all fine. I think Fire is pretty weak. Electric frontline is strong, but Electric backline is pretty weak. Wood is fine, especially if you have a Neeko or a Taric early with Ixtal in already. Say you have a Kiana or an Emilio already. You can start stacking up the HP on your tanks really early, but it's also not all that important. Stone, same idea. They're going to be spawned in the front line. Anything that forces you to put your carry in one of these Shen or Kassadin hexes is going to be kind of detrimental, just because like say I have Neeko here, right? Obviously units can kind of like wrap around my backline, even if I have like a couple tanks here. You generally want units to surround your Neeko, so these 3 middle hexes are going to be a lot stronger. Otherwise, like Neeko items are pretty, I guess, like once again, they're not very specific. Like you just really want a healing item, and then you want like one of Titans or Crown Guard, and then generally speaking, you want a second healing item or another Titans or Crown Guard. You can go Morello or Archangels in a pinch, say you need more damage. Sometimes it depends on the Ixtal you have. Like obviously in Wood, you don't have to go as tanky, so you can go a little bit more damage. Depending on your Soraka items, you might want to change up your Neeko items. It is a lot of like back and forth, kind of like finding a balance. The best augments for this comp is going to be like Double Trouble. Oh, I forgot to mention, in the old comp, same idea, Double Trouble is going to be really strong. You just start playing double of every unit. These obviously stop mattering as much. And this obviously even stops mattering. You just play like double Graves. Same idea with this comp. It's like if you hit Double Trouble, you just drop all of these. You're going to end up playing double Neeko, double Taric, double Soraka, and it's really easy. You don't even have to play Ixtal depending on the Ixtal. But obviously, if the Ixtal is really good, then you can play Milio over Taric. Eventually, at level 7, either you play 1 Taric or at level 6 and you play an Invoker, or you play 2 Tarics at level 7, and once again, the same idea as without Double Trouble. Otherwise, Gargantuan Resolve, that gives you a Titans, and then you go for a second Titans on Neeko, is really strong. All the healing augments are good. Harm Assist, Cybernetic Leech, Healing Orbs, all strong. There's just so many augments that you can actually play with this comp. Long Distance Pals. So in the case of Long Distance Pals, you're going to position something like this, where you carry a Soraka, and you're just like sharing it between Soraka and Neeko. A lot of +1s, maybe the Ixtal +1 is good, depending on the second hex. There's just a lot of augments you can play with this comp. The Legend hardly matters as well. Econ can kind of matter, but for the most part, combat is still better. That being said, like if you get open golden ticket and you want to like play this comp, obviously it's still going to be really strong. So moving on, if any of you guys are familiar, currently we're playing on the B patch, which will most likely be the regionals patch. But if you were playing around when the B patch wasn't around, you'll definitely have noticed this comp, which is Multicasters. This comp is really easy. If you play during, once again, without the P patch, you'll know how strong this comp was. They did nerf it a lot already, but that being said, it's still really strong. I would say for this comp specifically, if you are looking to angle this comp, most of the time you're going to be playing the TF Legend for Pandora's items, just because getting your quote-unquote best in slot in this comp is going to be really important, and that's just going to look like double Stoneplate Galio, if possible, Blue Buff TF, Gunblade TF, and then either Deathcap or Jewel Gauntlet. In a pinch, Giant Slayer is going to be fine, but generally speaking, if you have Giant Slayer, that means that you should have something like Perfected Repetition or maybe even Long Distance Pals to be giving you more of that raw AP that gives your unit a lot of damage. This comp is really, really easy. You're just going to be rolling on 6. Swain and obviously Poppy goes in before J4, but if you end up hitting a J4 on 6, you can just throw that in right away. Eventually, you level to 7 for Swain, and you're just going to go for all of these 3 stars. So TF, Galio, Sona, Talia, and Vel'Koz. The most important ones to the least important ones goes in the order of TF and Galio are the 2 most important ones, and then it goes Vel'Koz, and then Sona. I'd say Talia is the first one that you can get rid of, but at the same time, going for Talia 3, especially in certain galaxies where you have a lot of items, is going to be really strong. In a pinch, say you have a lot of Swains that you're hitting on level 6 because you're playing for a level 3-2, kind of like roll down, upgrade everything at 2-star, and you have a lot of Swains, you can play that as your main tank over Galio. It is going to be weaker, but it's not going to be so weak that the comp is unplayable. This comp is really, really straightforward. It's the same items on pretty much every single unit. Say you have like a bunch of Vel'Kozes, you can choose to stack Vel'Koz over Twisted Fate and go 7. Maybe you can roll for Vel'Koz 3 that way, but kind of like be ready to swap it up. Say you have like certain types of removers or like certain types of units, you can like swap it up. But for the most part, this comp is really, really rigid. So you're just playing around these units and trying to figure out your best setup with these units. So with Pandora's, you want to hit those first, and then obviously you're trying to go for Morello and Shiv just because they give you your anti-MR and anti-heal. Sona right now obviously applies Morello super, super well. It's probably the best application of it in the game, especially on an early game unit, even better than old best applications of it, such as like Ashe. But yeah, Sona is just a really strong unit right now. So if you can find a way to play Sona in a lot of different comps, it's actually really strong. But in this comp, she's pretty much just trying to hold Shiv Morello. Lastly, we have a Void Reroll. So this is going to be a comp that's like probably something you've never seen before, just because it's relatively uncommon. I would only ever play this with +1, so that means you open a Void Crest, and once you open a Void Crest, you just want to play tempo on your stage 2, so you play aggressively, just because Void Opener is so strong in the early game. Generally speaking, if you have upgrades, you are going to be able to beat out most of the comps, and then you're going to look for a level 6 board that looks like this. Before it was Talia, now, once again, after the Sona buffs, Sona is going to be really, really strong, so you drop Talia. That being said, if you do hit a lot of Talias, say you have like 6 or 7 on your 3-2, then going for Talia 3 is going to be a really enticing option. And in those cases, you can play it over Sona, but for the most part, you do want to be playing Sona, right? And then the most important items for this comp is going to be Spark. Spark is significantly better than Shiv. Obviously, once you have one, you don't need the other. And then the next most important item is going to be Morello or Sunfire. Obviously, whichever one comes first, you slam. If it's Morello, it goes on Sona or Vel'Koz. Even Vel'Koz is completely fine. Sunfire, it goes on Kasten, and ideally, you're just rolling on 6 until you have literally all of these upgraded. Sometimes it is difficult to go for Malzahar 3 and Cho'gath 3 on 6, but sometimes if you're just sitting on 6 long enough, you can just go for it. Otherwise, you just go for Blue Buff Vel'Koz, Blue Buff Sona is fine as well, Shojin Sona, just like a random mana item is fine. All of them are fine, Adaptive Helm, Shojin, and Blue Buff, so don't be too picky with it. But I will say Blue Buff is the best, so if you're in a spot where you are strong and you don't need to slam right away, try to go for Blue Buff where it's possible. Otherwise, you just finish tanking Kassadin, and then once you get Rek'Sai 3, you can start giving Rek'Sai the standard Rek'Sai items. Augments for this comp pretty much don't matter. This is like the most like, oh, you hit Void +1, you can just play if you have the items. The augments start not mattering. You just want like some sort of team-wide random augments. Reroll augments are fine as well, like healing orbs, contagion, stuff like that. Long distance pulse is like kind of mediocre with this comp. Stable evolution is really strong, obviously. That's just a void specific augment. So stuff like golden ticket's going to be strong as well. It is difficult to, you know, get all these augments, but same idea. You just go to 3-2, you roll for these exact units, and you just sit on level 6 until everything's upgraded, more or less. And then you go level 7, and you upgrade many of them as you can. And eventually, if you make it to 8, you can play the 4 multicaster. A lot of people ask me, oh, should I play Baron? I would say you should not play Baron. A lot of people are going to ask why. Simple answer is Baron sucks. But yeah, just play 4 multicaster, especially if you have Vel'Koz 3 and Sona 3. It's going to be really, really strong. And it's going to be like a much stronger version of this comp. But obviously, it's a little bit harder to get to and a little bit kind of like more niche. So yeah, look out for this comp. I think, especially in the lower elos, this comp is going to be super, super strong just because of how often you're super stable in the early and mid game. So yeah, definitely look out for this comp. I think most of you guys wouldn't have seen this comp yet. And if you have, maybe you didn't know how to play it and you are interested in it, this is how you play it. So yeah, that's the video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the description below. Once again, you know, always like the video. If you like it, subscribe if you like the content. And if you want to look for me elsewhere, my Discord's in the description. My Twitch is going to be in the description, and my Twitter is going to be in the description. So feel free to, I don't know, find me anywhere else you want to. And yeah, that's the video. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Peace.